For 35 years, the CIS has been a remarkably consistent advocate of a free market approach to economic management, and also a strong upholder of liberal societies and open debate.
CIS is an intellectual version of the Earth's molten core. The world-shaping force of CIS thinking has caused a tectonic plate shift in Australian politics. When CIS shakes up bad ideas, they fall down.
The CIS was the first and most important of the new private sector think tanks established, which challenged the old ideas and sought to produce new research outside the confines of either government or the academy.
In 1976, Australia had one of the most highly protected and heavily regulated economies in the Western world. The idea of establishing a think tank committed to economic liberalisation would have struck many people as a dead end. But that was exactly the point of establishing the CIS, to argue the case for free markets and deregulation.
In the midst of the rather depressing environment of 1976, Greg Lindsay, a high school maths teacher, decided to promote liberal ideas. In April, he wrote to Professor Lachlan Chipman, then a philosopher at the University of Wollongong. He wrote, "The fact that there are very few intellectuals in Australia that have any hope of discussing and arguing the case from the libertarian point of view, that is, free markets, minimal state and so on, is disturbing to me and many others. The centre here will be called the Centre for Independent Studies."
Back in the early 70s, I was despairing of the way I saw politics and the economy working in Australia. Some people thought it was a matter of politics, and I, for some reason or other, thought there was a problem with ideas. And I felt that it would be useful if I could generate some organisation that might try to address that particular issue. Did I think 35 years later that I'd still be at it? No, I didn't. But I think in that time we've now developed one of the true powerhouses of intellectual generation in this country.
The growth and influence of the CIS would not have been possible without its extraordinary and growing network of human capital. This network includes the individuals, companies and foundations who give financial support, the outside contributors from academia who the CIS relied on for the first decade of its life, and the CIS staff who are now the engine room of the centre. The CIS believes that ideas influence social culture, political institutions and policy. The 400 or so publications stand as a record of the centre's research, recommendations and ideas. The research has been supplemented by the hundreds of opinion pieces, radio and television appearances, and the increasingly important online presence and communication via social media. Economic issues have always been a major theme in the centre's research. The CIS has again been at the forefront of the debate surrounding the global financial crisis.
The Centre for Independent Studies contributed greatly to the economic reforms of the 1980s and 90s that made Australia such a great place today. And we very much kept the idea of a free market economy alive throughout the GFC. And today, the CIS is developing ideas to keep Australia a prosperous place throughout the 21st century.
With near consensus reached on the economic direction of Australia, the 1990s saw the CIS lead the debate on the need for reform of the welfare and benefit system.
Underpinning so much of the work the CIS did in the social policy field was the message, the crucially important message, that just because there's a social problem doesn't mean to say that it's always the government that should step in to fix it.
There's been a huge shift in the policy debate. What was once really controversial has become very much mainstream, this idea that we need to get people off welfare and into work. And these are ideas that the CIS has been pushing for the last couple of decades. And it's really amazing to see that they've now become very much accepted knowledge across both major parties.
One of the most confronting issues in Australia today is the plight of Indigenous Australians. The CIS has not backed away from this issue. It's continued to diagnose causes and recommend policy solutions, however unpopular they might be.
The annual review of Indigenous education that the Indigenous Affairs Research Program has conducted has shown that the 50 worst performing schools in Australia are Indigenous schools with separate Indigenous curriculums. Our work on private property rights has contributed to the passage of 99-year lease legislation in the Northern Territory and in Queensland.
The Centre's research also looks outwards. Currently, John Lee's original work on China's economic and political strategy is attracting worldwide media attention.
The Centre's work on China is well ahead of the curve. We anticipated a lot of the problems in the Chinese economy long before they became apparent to a lot of analysts. And in addition to that, our work on the relationship between America and China gained significant coverage in both Washington, in Canberra, and also in Beijing.
The CIS realises its ideas will not always sell themselves. It has successfully established a range of events that broadcast its messages to target audiences. Renowned events such as Concilium, which has taken an ideas conference to a new level. The Liberty and Society Student Program, which is continuing to build relationships with up-and-coming young leaders. The annual John Bonython Lecture, which has brought some of the biggest intellects in the world to Australia. And the General Lectures, which offer opportunities for the membership and the general public to hear ideas firsthand.
Hayek said that the intellectuals broadly defined were the second-hand dealers in ideas. They are the transmission lines of information to the public. Nothing has changed from when Hayek said that in 1949.
The great thing about the CIS is that it's been an uncorrupted advocate repeatedly of free market values and free market principles.
CIS has become one of the great powerhouses of ideas for the promotion of freedom in this country, and the future for us is to continue to do that in every way that we can.
Thank you for defending freedom not only in your own country, but freedom around the world. The independence and the affection of freedom lovers everywhere for our friends at the Centre has no bounds. So all I can say is thank you.